Deep Learning Summit in London today, where I've had the opportunity to meet with some really amazing speakers and attendees. They've come from startups, unis, and leading tech and AI companies. We've heard about the most recent research advancements in deep learning, from progressions in natural language processing to autonomous vehicles and generative modelling. I'm now joined by Antonia Creswell, who's a deep learning PhD student at Imperial College. Antonia's work focuses on unsupervised learning and generative models, and she spoke to us earlier about her most recent research. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been great to have you here at the Deep Learning Summit. I was lucky enough to catch your presentation yesterday, but for everyone else listening, can you give me a quick overview of your current research and what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so I work primarily with generative models. So these are models where you can train them to to learn from some kind of data and then reproduce like new samples of that data that don't currently exist. So like, for instance, you can show a model a whole load of faces and then you can actually generate new faces that don't exist in the world. Like, they're not real people, you can just produce their faces.
Okay, that's amazing. And how did you kind of get into this in the first place? What brought you into generative models and computer vision?
Yeah, so I actually came from quite a strange background for this sort of work in some senses. So I did an undergrad degree in bioengineering at Imperial.
Okay.
And I did a lot of projects to do with image processing and computer vision, which I decided pretty quickly, probably in my second year, maybe even before that, that I was really interested in this sort of thing. And I chose to do a lot of projects in this. And then I did one exchange year in California, and I was able to pick a lot of my modules. So I picked everything I needed to do more computer vision, and I did an interesting project there with a really great supervisor. And then when I came back to, so actually for my final year project, which I did in the States, I actually ended up using some, we call them deep features. So it was information that you can extract from a pre-trained deep learning model.
Okay.
And basically this revolutionized my results. Basically overnight I got way better results than the results I had, and so I was immediately convinced that deep learning was definitely the way forward for computer vision, which, I mean, everyone's kind of realizing that and everyone kind of knows that now. But it was just amazing for me to see it. And then from then I kind of decided, okay, I'm definitely going to go into computer vision, and it might be deep learning. And then I started a PhD, and definitely don't look back now.
Okay, so I guess as well within deep learning, unsupervised learning is something that's like growing massively at the moment. So are you using a lot of unsupervised learning in your work at the moment?
Yeah, so the great thing about generative models is that they don't need to be trained with labeled data. So unsupervised means training without labels.
Yeah.
And then, most generative models you can train entirely without labels. So because the focus of what I do is on generative models, I pretty much focus on training without labels, which also as a PhD project is quite good because it's often quite difficult to get hold of this labeled data.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So are you facing many challenges with this at the moment, like within your work? What kind of obstacles are you facing?
The main difficulties are things with like resource. It's not really, I mean, obviously there are a lot of technical challenges, but the main challenges, like when you're working at university level, is resource.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. That makes sense. And what do you think, what other disciplines need to come together kind of to advance your work in generative models? Do you see any other disciplines being like integral or that could help out at all with your work?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Like with generative models, you're trying, especially like this image generation, you're trying to generate images that are perceptually coherent. So things that people, for instance, if you're generating faces, you want them to look real. And at the moment, it's very difficult for us to evaluate these. We don't have any good way to evaluate generative models except for showing them to people.
Right, okay.
And like designing those perceptual experiments is not something that someone with a deep learning background is necessarily going to be very good at. Like, you need people who have expertise in designing these human perception experiments. And I've tried to work with people like this, and trying to design some projects around these lines, but it is very difficult if you don't have the right expertise to actually design these experiments.
Obviously, we're speaking today from the Deep Learning Summit, and you were comparing for the event this afternoon, and all day actually. Were there any talks or discussions that you found particularly interesting? Did you have any favourites that you heard from today?
Well, actually, there were a lot of things I thought were interesting. So, one of the things I think that was an interesting idea was being able to take a photograph of food and matching it with the recipe. I thought this was really interesting and cool idea.
I think I'd definitely use that a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think in general as well, people who work on taking media and putting it in different kinds of media, so images, text, and putting it in the same space, same relative space. So if you have an image of a cat and an article about a cat, it puts it in the same space as each other. I think that kind of thing is really, really interesting, because a lot of what deep learning is about is kind of learning representations that are meaningful. And when you can put two very different things in the same representation space, that means you've done a pretty good job. So I think that was really interesting, the talks about that and this recipe.
Yeah, as you just mentioned, two really different kinds of topics there. There's been so much diversity at the event over the last couple of days, and it's been great to see so many women here, from speakers to attendees. But being a woman working in AI, have you faced many challenges?
Yeah, so I would say I personally haven't actually faced that many challenges. I would say I've met other people when I was actually studying abroad specifically, who have, and they would say people would specifically, dismiss something that they would say.
And obviously it's great to see so many women and young girls coming into the field. Do you have any advice that you
maybe not specific to girls, but in general, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be had, and maybe even by women as well, because obviously a lot of people would like to increase their diversity, and I think making choices that will open more opportunities for you, and just grabbing any opportunity. This event as well, this wasn't I saw this as quite a good opportunity, even though it was quite scary to kind of host the event and introduce the speakers. I was well, this is a good way to force me to speak to people, and
it's a good way to make new contacts, meet new people, and
so
connect
I think,
as well.
Yeah, I think forcing yourself into a situation that maybe you don't are not comfortable in, but to just take those opportunities, it's definitely a good thing to
And
do.
it's definitely something that in hindsight you'd look back on it, you're not going to regret something you did do, you'll only ever regret something you didn't do. So
most of the time,
yeah, most of the time. Well, hopefully you don't regret doing this anyway.
No, definitely not. No.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to talk to you.
Sure, thanks.
And thank you for comparing the event. I think you did a really great job, so
thank you.
Well done. Thank you. On the next episode, we'll hear from Elena Kochkina, PhD student at the University of Warwick, who will share her research in opinion mining using heterogeneous online data, as well as discussing natural language processing and its use in social media.